Okay, so my ISM research, I'm going over obstetrics and gynecology. I think you guys should know my original quote, hurry, hurry, makes bad curry. I don't think that's a good idea to put in my portfolio. So my new quote is, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt the people doing it. I always did not like people putting limits on me. They say the sky is your limit, but we have a man on the moon, so that's obviously not true. And then I think I should give you a little background about my family in general. My dad and my mom, they're immigrants from here. We're not Indian. I think I told you guys this before. And they came here. And I think I really admire them, start with nothing. I remember my dad telling me a story. When he came here, he came to the airport, only had like a few cents, either to call my mom, who was already in New York, or to buy some food. And he's just sitting there all alone, waiting for my mom to come and pick him up. So I can only imagine that fear, just by yourself in a new country, waiting for someone else to come, and you don't even know if they'll be there. So I thought that was the fact that they climbed their way up to make a family and buy us a house. I think I want to make sure that when I grow up, I could give them something, a life that they never had. And then, so I have 3 older brothers, and there was me, and my oldest brother, he graduated from NYU, and he's got a job with Power Waterhouse Coopers, and he's working right now. And then my second oldest brother, he's at Johns Hopkins for a master's program in biotechnology. And then my third youngest brother is at UNT. He's going to go into health insurance. So we're all pretty much around in the medical field, in business and doctors or insurance. And I hopefully wish to be the next doctor, OB-GYN. So, yep, that's why I'm studying obstetrics and gynecology. And then more reasons. What better way to help life than to be the one who delivers it? Of course, there are many ways to help life. Social workers do so much. But I found it fascinating, the fact that females in general could develop another human organism in them. No offense to males. Of course they do contribute so much, but I think I remember something, women were considered warriors for doing that if they died during childbirth, because it's impressive to what they do. All the labor pains is equivalent to such a thing. So that I find incredible for what we could do. My research in medicine, it was more focused, not really everywhere in medicine, mostly on the gynecology side. I think one big confusion is midwives and OB-GYNs. A midwife is not a doctor. They are a nurse. They would go through, they could go through college, but they actually go through college and they go to an institution that specializes in midwifery, and then they do that. They do traditional birth, they do home birth, so there is no gynecology side. They do post, after birth, and pre-birth, and that's really it. You don't really do any follow-ups if you have any other reasons. And I think the reason why they're looked down is because of that. They don't go to med school at all. It's more traditional, but the good thing about them is that they don't do unnecessary medical practices like doctors do. So the reason why they're slowly being introduced because of that. And then vaginal delivery and cesarean section or C-section deliveries. C-section deliveries are great in some ways. They do, if a mom is preeclampsia or the baby has the umbilical cord wrapped around his throat, then yes, of course, that's necessary. But it has some causes, a mother would choose to have a C-section to have their baby born on a specific date, timing of the month or whatever. And that is not ethical in some ways, because the longer the baby is in there, the better the development. So it's usually best to just have vaginal delivery. And most women choose not to have vaginal delivery because they don't want to go through the labor pains. But personally, I think women are made to handle those labor pains. I understand this may be sensitive, but the menstruation cycles that we have, those pains that we get, it's to build up for labor. We're physically built to have a child, even if most of us don't want to have children later on. So it's perfectly normal. But I can understand if a woman does want to have C-section, a doctor is, if they would choose much rather, we would have to do it. It's their decision, but we would highly advise for a vaginal delivery. And then another thing that I researched, that I had no idea what it was about, postpartum depression. I don't know if you remember Hayden Panettiere. She said that she experienced, and you never really hear about the mental side of healthcare in general. That has been sort of pushed aside. Most of it was physical. And I think the mental health in general should be more more observed in general, because like a lot of people who are in jail may be having some psychiatric issues, and we're not recognizing, we're just judging them because it's like instinct for us to judge people. So before you look at someone because of like, oh, what, the right thing to do, I mean, something could be wrong in their health, their mental health, and in general, we should focus more on that than we should on physical sometimes. So I think that the postpartum depression, like depression in general, I think we've all gone through a rough time like that. And that should be regularly checked throughout our lifetimes, regardless if it's during a delivery or some big event in your life. And then again, elective deliveries, inducing labor, that can also cause with C-sections and having the babies at the specific time or such. So the doctor would do that only, I guess, if it's necessary. Premature babies, yes, or they're getting oxygen deprivation, that's fine too, but they're usually not chosen. Actually, elective deliveries, research has been shown that the more doctors that do less, they get like refunded for not doing it. So it's actually working against it, and it's improving for less, having less of those. And then we also have a medical records issue. Just like how the internet works, we have you can have Yahoo email and you can have a Gmail email, and you can still send emails across from one another. And it doesn't matter if you have a different type. But with medical records, you can't do that. If you have one program and a doctor has another program, there's no way they can share information without faxing or something, and it's not easily accessible to doctors. So I think one big issue that could be shared is really having more medical records connections would be better. So, yeah. My first interview, I think you all remember him very well, Dr. Jason Harn. So I don't know if all of you heard, I drove there, and then Coach Goff texted me, he wasn't there. So I was like, okay, again, an emergency delivery. And then, I drove back, second time rescheduled, drove there, he had another emergency delivery. And then I called to the office manager, and she's like, yeah, if you want to come after school that day, the same day. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So, I mean, I think most people feel annoyed that their interview got rescheduled twice, but I think that made me realize indirectly that even though he didn't necessarily teach me, that it's a time commitment thing. And when I had my interview, I asked him what was like the biggest struggle in him, and he'd say coming home to see my kids, and I'm just like, could I really start a family if I were to take up this job? If I have a 4-year-old kid whose birthday party is on that same day and I gotta go, it's hard to balance a social life and this doctor life. So I think that hit me hard when I realized priorities are going to set when my job will become more important. But I learned the hard way with time commitment. My interview with Dr. Jen Dennings, I got this contact through the Wakeland ISM teacher. We scheduled an interview with her one day, and then she showed up, and it was like a miscommunication. So I scheduled it again, and I was kind of nervous because actually at Dallas Presby, the whole Ebola Act, I know most people would look down on Dallas Presby. That's sort of a biased perspective. I remember my health science U teacher, she told me that I don't want my kids to have, well, she didn't, like some other people would say, I don't want my kids being born at Dallas Presby because of the whole Ebola incident. Well, they're perfectly fine there. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. But I have to congratulate the nurses and doctors who still work there, and despite getting looked down because of that incident. What she really introduced me, this was like an hour-long interview, so it was just like on and on, but I got a lot of it. She introduced me to the different specializations. So she talked about endocrinology, oncology. There were different specializations you can go on, but the thing is, once you go into those specializations, you don't really go further more. You would stop doing more of the OB and gynecological side, but it was interesting to see those. Dr. Rinku Mehta at Frisco Institute for Reproductive Medicine, I got her through Dr. Jennings. Now, I fangirled over her because there's this Indian station called 104.9. Guys, everyone listen to it, 104.9. And they always advertise Dr. Rinku Mehta as like the top-notch OB-GYN of infertility and reproductive. And when I went to tell my mom and dad, they're like, Devina, remember that was on the Indian station? I was like, what? So I was like, oh my God, I'm interviewing with this person who's like amazing, and then there's me. And then she was telling me she was brilliant. And when I interviewed her, I was at Starbucks, and she was talking about her endocrinology, and she didn't really find delivering babies all that fun. It was somewhat boring to her. I'm like, how could that be boring out of all things? But she thought it was more fun seeing a couple be so happy that they can finally start a family. And then, that got me thinking, you have unplanned pregnancies or couples, they have no use of contraceptives whatsoever, and then they don't want the kid. Well, these people are actually struggling to have that child. So that kind of puts in perspective the value of what you're doing to someone else's body even more. And then she does a lot of work with hormonal imbalances. So again, I have some friends who would say my menstruation cycles, they're just not in key right now. And I'm just like, if we could get these on track with hormones. I know I'm maybe making some of you guys uncomfortable, but this is like my topic and game right here, my future. I would never deliver any of y'all's baby. That's just crossing the line. I'm sorry. But anyways, yeah, I enjoyed this interview very much. And then my next person I interviewed, Dr. Dobie, she was also worked with Dr. Jason Harn. I got her through Dr. Jason Harn. She gave me more of the business aspect. She had recently started working there, and I guess I didn't realize a lot of private practices, it's a lot more business than you might think. A lot of these OB-GYNs actually start their own practices. So I was always wondering if it was a good idea to work in a private practice or a hospital. A private practice, of course, I'd have that business aspect, but then I have to worry about as well as the medical practices. Because in a hospital, the businesses are already taken care of. I'm with the team. I just worry about myself and my patients. So I was always debating which is good and bad. There really is no which one's better or not. It's just depending on who you are as a person. But it was interesting to learn. She was very kind and sweet. My fifth one, Dr. Branning. Now I fangirled over him too, but this was like the first, like when I found him, I was like, Coach Goff, I need you to friend him on LinkedIn. Like, this is the guy, this is the man. But it took a really long time. Like it was just only recently that I got this interview with him, and honestly, he gave me the best story about his interview. He told me when he was like a little kid, like our age, any roadkill he'd find, he'd dissect it. So. So I was trying to find a doctor who had a good backstory, because most of the ones I did find, they told me they only became passionate through their third year of medical school, and I didn't want someone who didn't find what they loved doing till at the very end. That sort of bothered me, because I love this as of right now, but I want to make sure I love it till the end, So when he entered medical school, he told me he didn't want to be an OB-GYN or a psychiatrist. And part of obstetrics and gynecology, you sort of do need to know the mental part of women. So even if they say yes and it means no, he sort of understands some of that. So it was interesting to know, he became just that, a psychiatrist and an OB-GYN at the same time. And I was really impressed, his ethics and his work and all his credentials were amazing. He uses this, if women want to get a hysterectomy, they have a robotic thing, and he played video games to control the robotic, and he was just amazing in general. But yeah. And then my last interview, I actually did 6 interviews, was Dr. Barry Swartz at UT Southwestern Medical Center. I got kind of afraid when I had 4 interviews, and I just oh no, I need one more, I don't know where I'm going to get it from. So I just emailed him on a whim, and he replied the next day. And I fangirl a 3rd time because I'm like, oh my God, this guy is up there, and then this little old me. And so I was really impressed by him, because this man, if he were to become a possible mentor for me, write me a referral to medical school, I'm set for life. That would be so relieving. But it wasn't really an interview. It felt more just conversation. He would give me book recommendations and tell me about life and give me life advice. It really wasn't anything related. It was medically speaking. He also proposed the idea of how the medical records, they don't translate well. But I really enjoyed it. It's more like talking to your grandpa more than it was talking with. He even looks like a grandpa. It was more like talking to a grandpa more than it was like talking to this professional here. But I enjoyed it a lot. And then what am I going to do now? I plan on asking Dr. George Branning, the second fangirl I had, to be my mentor. Yeah. Thank you.